I'm 82 years old now. At this age, people stop asking you what your plans are. They don't ask where you see yourself in 5 years. Most people assume there won't be 5 years. And lately, I've been thinking about something that followed me quietly through most of my life. I confused stability with happiness. For a very long time, I believed they were the same thing. They're not. I'm not telling you this because I'm bitter. My life wasn't tragic. I had a job, a house, a family. From the outside, it probably looked like everything worked out the way it was supposed to. But when you reach your 80s, you start to notice the difference between a life that functioned and a life that was actually lived. And the difference can be very quiet. I grew up in a house where stability was the highest virtue. My father worked at the same factory for 38 years. He woke up at 5:30 every morning, ate the same breakfast, and left the house without much conversation. He didn't complain. That was the point. When the factory laid people off, he stayed. When other men moved around looking for better pay, he stayed. When things got difficult, he stayed. My mother used to say, "Your father is a steady man. That's what matters." Steady. That word stayed with me. When I was in my early 20s, I didn't dream about exciting things. I dreamed about predictable ones. A stable job, a safe neighborhood, bills paid on time. I wasn't chasing adventure. I was chasing relief. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from the feeling that life could fall apart if you made one wrong decision. So when I was 25 and a company offered me a position in their accounting department, I took it without hesitation. It wasn't exciting work, but it was steady. Good benefits, a clear ladder to climb, the kind of job people described as secure. I remember feeling proud of that word, secure. Around that same time, I met a woman named Linda. She had a quiet laugh and a way of listening that made you feel like your words mattered. We met through mutual friends, nothing dramatic, no sparks flying across the room, just two people who got along easily. We married 2 years later. Again, it made sense. We both wanted the same kind of life. A house, maybe a couple of kids, something stable. And for a long time, that's exactly what we built. I worked every weekday, same office, same desk, numbers, reports, meetings that felt longer than they needed to be. Linda worked part-time once the children started school. She kept the house in a way that always made it feel calm when I walked through the door. Dinner was usually ready around 6. We talked about practical things, bills, schedules, school events. It was a good life. At least that's what I told myself, because nothing was falling apart. The mortgage got paid, the kids had what they needed, the car started in the morning. I told myself that was happiness. But the truth is, I never actually stopped to ask what happiness felt like. Stability was easier to measure. You could see it in your bank account, in the routine of your days, in the absence of chaos. And so I kept choosing it. Year after year. I missed small things along the way, not because I didn't care, but because there always seemed to be time later. When my son had a school play one Thursday evening, I stayed late at the office finishing a quarterly report. It felt responsible. When my daughter wanted me to come watch her soccer practice, I told her maybe next week. I had paperwork to catch up on. Next week felt close enough. When Linda suggested we take a trip somewhere we'd never been, I said maybe when things settled down at work. Things never really settled down at work. That's the thing about stable lives. They're full of small postponements, not big dramatic mistakes, just quiet delays. I told myself I was doing the right thing, being dependable, being practical, the kind of man my father had been, steady. Years passed that way. You don't notice it happening. Children grow up slowly when you see them every day, but one day you look at them and realize they're adults. My son moved to another state for work. My daughter got married and started a family of her own. Linda and I stayed in the same house. The rooms got quieter. And that's when I first started noticing something I hadn't paid attention to before. Linda had changed. Not in an obvious way, just distance. She spent more time reading in the evenings. Sometimes she went for long walks by herself. We still talked, but the conversations were thinner. Practical things again. Groceries, the weather, news from the kids. One night, sitting at the kitchen table, she said something I didn't know how to answer. She said, "Do you ever feel like we were always waiting for life to start?" I remember laughing a little, not because it was funny, because I didn't know what she meant. I said, "What do you mean? We had a good life." And she nodded. "Yes," she said, "we had a stable life." She didn't say anything else after that, but the sentence stayed in the room. At the time, I pushed it away. I had spent decades believing stability was the goal, the proof that you were doing life correctly. Admitting it might not be enough, that felt dangerous, so I ignored the thought. A few years later, Linda got sick. It wasn't sudden. At first it was just fatigue, then doctor visits, then tests, then the word cancer entered the conversation. Everything slowed down after that. Hospital rooms have a way of stripping life down to its essentials. You sit there for hours, machines humming quietly, people speaking in careful voices, and suddenly all the things that felt urgent before, they don't matter anymore. Deadlines, reports, promotions. I retired earlier than I had planned. I spent most of my days sitting beside her bedside. We talked more during those months than we had in years, not about practical things, about memories, places we had almost visited, things we had almost done, conversations we had postponed. One evening, not long before she died, she said something very gently. She said, "You always wanted us to be safe." I nodded. "Yes," I said. Then she smiled in a way that was kind, not accusing. "But sometimes," she said, "I think we were so busy being safe that we forgot to be alive." I didn't argue with her, because by then I understood what she meant. When you're young, stability feels like the foundation of happiness. But stability without presence, without attention, without shared moments, it can quietly turn into something else. Routine, distance, years passing without much being felt. Linda died when I was 74. The house became very quiet after that. You don't realize how much sound another person brings into your life until it disappears. The footsteps, the small conversations across the room, the feeling that someone else is inside the same day as you. Now, the days move slowly. I still wake up early out of habit. I make coffee. Sometimes I sit by the window and watch the street wake up. Young people hurrying to work, children walking to school. They all look busy, focused, responsible, the way I used to be. And sometimes I wonder if they realize how easily a life can pass while you're being careful. I'm not saying stability is bad. It keeps roofs over heads. It protects families. It gives people a place to stand. But it isn't the same thing as happiness. I learned that very late. Happiness isn't always safe. Sometimes it asks you to stop working and watch your daughter play soccer. Sometimes it asks you to take the trip, even if the timing isn't perfect. Sometimes it asks you to sit with the person you love and talk about things that aren't practical. And those moments, they're fragile. You can't store them up for later. Later is a strange place. It always feels close, until suddenly it's not there anymore. There are things in my life I can't fix now. I can't go back to that Thursday evening and sit in the audience at my son's school play. I can't take Linda on the trip she suggested all those years ago. I can't replace the conversations we never had because I was tired or distracted or convinced there would be another chance. Those moments are gone. Time doesn't return things just because you finally understand them. That's the hardest part of growing old. Clarity arrives, but it arrives late. If you're listening to this and you're younger than me, I'm not here to tell you what you should do. I've lived long enough to know that people rarely change their lives because someone older gives them advice. But I can tell you what I wish I had understood earlier. A life that looks stable from the outside can still feel empty on the inside. You can do everything correctly and still miss the parts that mattered most. So sometimes it's worth asking yourself a quiet question, not whether your life is secure, but whether it actually feels alive. I don't have many years left. You feel that when you're 82, not in a dramatic way, just in small reminders. Friends disappearing, doctor appointments becoming more frequent, the world moving faster than your body can follow. But I still sit by the window in the mornings, and sometimes I think about Linda's voice in the kitchen, about the question she asked me years ago, whether we were always waiting for life to start.